What's up, everyone, and welcome to Scourge of War Waterloo, episode 18. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at Mont St. Jean, Sabres versus Bayonets. We'll be playing as the Allies, and we will be defending against Marshal Ney's cavalry charge. At some point in the battle, basically due to the pounding that they were receiving from the French artillery massed opposite them on the ridge, Wellington decided to um, have his army move back 100 paces from where they were, uh, basically moving behind the ridge for cover from the artillery. Uh, Marshal Ney saw this and thought the Allies were retreating and wanted to mess the French cavalry to basically pursue and cut them all down. But he misread the situation. Wellington was not retreating; he was just moving his army back, 100 yards or something, um, to lessen the impact of the French artillery on his army. Uh, so Ney, without any infantry support or any artillery or really anything, sent the bulk of the French cavalry forward to what he thought was pursuing a retreating enemy. Instead, Wellington's men held fast, and they were freely able to form infantry squares because Ney foolishly did not send any infantry to support the cavalry. And without any infantry, there's no reason, there's nothing to make the Allied infantry not form squares with impunity and just get away with it. Um, you know, the cavalry really can't do anything against infantry squares. The idea of the cavalry is that they force the enemy into square, and while they're stuck in square, the infantry can come up and form line and shoot them to pieces. They can also bring artillery up, and artillery can pound squares to oblivion. Ney didn't do any of this, so he really had nothing to do but basically run up to the British squares and just kind of run around them because if you're able to form square and there's nothing to compel you to not, you're just going to freely do it and just cut cavalry to pieces because they won't charge into a square full of bayonets, and they don't really have any way to shoot back against infantry that are in square. Um, and so Marshal Ney's cavalry charge was largely a disaster. Um, I think Napoleon was not feeling well at this particular point in the battle, and so had actually removed himself from the front, leaving Ney in charge. And I think he was furious with Ney when he actually came up to the front and saw what was going on. Um, so we're going to be playing the Allies here, and this scenario is, for lack of a better word, dumb. Um, it's very easy to play, but not so easy to win. Um, the objective in this scenario, you start out holding it, but it's not worth much. It's worth something like 10 points a minute, and it's only a 30-minute scenario, as you can see right up here. So the objective is worth a grand total of 300 points, and you need 1,000 points for a major victory. So you're going to have to inflict a lot of casualties on the French in order to actually achieve a major victory. And that's not as easy as you might think. Yes, we are in square. Yes, the cavalry really can't hurt us. But a lot of this scenario really depends on how aggressive the French AI plays it. Um, you have to extract a lot of casualties from them, but you also can't do it so quickly that they just run away, and you either are stuck where you are, and you can't extract enough casualties for a major victory, or you have to pursue them, by playing hopscotch with squares and basically hopping forward. And the problem with that is, yes, you can chase the cavalry down and get some points from them, but you're also bringing yourself ever closer to the French artillery. And as I said, artillery, as you get closer to it, can really put a hurting on infantry squares. So it's largely a balance of hoping the French AI attacks aggressively enough over a long enough period of time that you can extract enough points to get to a major victory, uh, while using judicious pursuit. Yes, you have to move forward. Yes, you have to pursue them, but you can't pursue them so quickly and so fast that they run all the way back to the French lines, and you're basically now too far forward and you're getting pounded by the French artillery. You cannot afford to take a lot of casualties in this scenario. Um, the point total is that you need to achieve a major victory is very high in this scenario. Even though 1,000 points doesn't sound like a lot, considering some of the other point totals we've had to achieve in some other scenarios. Remember, the objective in the scenario is only worth 10 points a minute, which is, it's nothing, and like I said, it will only total 300 points, even if you hold it from beginning to end, which is not hard to do. The French never get near the objective, and it's very easy to hold. So you will hold it the entire scenario, and it's only worth 300 points. Um, so I'm going to show you basically the best way to get the amount of casualties you need, um, while not pursuing the French so aggressively that you drive them completely from the field and, basically end up, infantry square hopscotching yourself into the death range of their artillery. Um, this takes some practice. I've been playing this game for a long time. Remember that. You will probably not get this the first time you try it. I am going to show you the things you need to do, but some of this is luck in hoping the French cavalry will be aggressive enough to basically stick around um, and let you extract enough points from them. Casualties are points in this scenario. The objective is only worth, you know, basically less than a third of what you need. So you're going to have to inflict a lot of casualties. The key is artillery. Your infantry squares will do damage to the cavalry, but nowhere near enough to get to the point totals, get to 1,000 points to what you need to inflict casualties. You must absolutely be able to effectively bring your artillery to bear through the majority of the front. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It's basically a formation I use where you're going to put an infantry square uh, on the left, kind of forward. Then you're going to have an artillery battery a little bit back behind them. And then on the right side, you're going to have another infantry square, basically the same amount of distance forward as the one on the left. So you're basically going to bookend uh, an artillery battery with two infantry squares on each side of it, and kind of forward of it. The reason they're forward of it is because you don't want the cavalry to have a choice of what to charge. In this game, cavalry will usually charge the target it first comes into charge distance of. So by having the infantry squares be forward of the artillery, you're basically denying the cavalry the choice of what to charge. They'll charge the square because that comes into range before the artillery does. And obviously they'll try to charge the square. They can't charge the square. They'll just kind of stop in front of it. The square will shoot them up. The artillery will shoot them up. And that's how we're going to get the point totals we need. But like I said, this is not by any means easy to do at first. So don't get discouraged if you try this and it doesn't quite work out for you. Because it's very easy to be overly aggressive in this scenario. This scenario is not hard to play uh, for you in terms of dominating the enemy and driving them from the field, if that's what you want to do. But that's not going to win you the scenario. You don't want the enemy to run. You need to extract enough points from them before they do so. So you can't really aggressively pursue them, and try to extract a lot of points, because like I said, even if you drive them to the field, you're gonna come in range of the French artillery, which will start pounding away on you, and that will take away whatever points you have started to earn by pursuing them. So it's a judicious balance of engaging the French cavalry but not overdoing it. And it's very easy to overdo it. because they can't hurt you. You're in square. There's nothing they have that can force you out of square, and they can't hurt you while you're in square. So it's very easy to be more aggressive than you really should be in this scenario. So anyway, enough of the monologue here. Let's actually show you what I'm talking about. So this is a divisional scenario. We're going to have 3 brigades, 2 small ones and 1 very large one. The very large one we're actually not going to use. If you put too many troops on the field, it's going to do 2 things. It's going to scare the French cavalry off very quickly because they just have no hope of penetrating your position, and you want to actually give them some hope. They really need it in this case because this was a dumb move by Marshal Ney. So we're only going to use the 2 small infantry brigades, and we're just going to keep the big one kind of in reserve back by the objective. Yeah, so, and like the other thing it does is if you use the big brigade, you're gonna block your artillery. You have to maintain good fields of fire with your artillery in order to extract enough points from the French cavalry, because the artillery is going to be your main source of damage, not the squares. The squares are basically there to protect the artillery while they just bomb the crap out of the French cavalry. So if you use all your troops, you're not going to be able to effectively bring your artillery to bear with a wide field of fire so that they can hit as many French as they possibly can. So we only need a couple of squares to get the job done here, and it's all about effective placing of them. So like I said, this is a divisional scenario. It is only 30 minutes long, and that is part of the problem with the scenario is you really have to extract a lot of points, and you have to do it quickly. So anyway, it says, as you and your aides watch from an elevated position, you all know what's coming, as the French cavalry is steadily and ominously massing in a line along your front. Although fear of what's about to happen is thumping in your heart, your confidence in your troops inspires the courage to stand and fight. Your men are well trained, and their officers know how to deal with cavalry, the timely formation of battalion squares, and the art of the bayonet. Time will tell the limits of your courage and the effectiveness of your training in stopping a French cavalry charge. And that time is now. Okay, so our objective is to maintain the objective throughout and protect the artillery. Now, these are the 3 brigades we have here. This is one of the small ones, this is one of the small ones, and this is the giant one. This is the one we're not even going to use because we'll just be putting too many troops on the field, scare off the French, and we won't be able to bring our artillery effectively to bear. And I believe I covered everything else that's going to go on here. We need 1,000 points for a major victory. And we have 3 infantry brigades of 14 battalions and 3 artillery batteries of 18 guns. And as I said, we're only going to be using a few infantry squares. We want to provide our guns with a large field of fire so that they can do massive damage to the French cavalry. All right, so it's booting up here. All righty. So the first thing I do is take charge of all my officers because I don't want anybody moving off and doing their own thing. I got to set this up in a real specific way. Okay, an attack is imminent and it appears to be French cavalry without infantry support. Prepare your troops accordingly and stop the cavalry along your position. Do not allow them to split the line. So you can see there's just a huge amount of cavalry out there along the French position. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, you can see we're on a ridge here, and I'm going to bring my artillery kind of to the top edge of the ridge so that they can have basically the best elevation and the best fields of fire. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bookend each artillery battery with infantry squares to protect them. Now, again, we're not using a lot, even though this is a whole division, we're not actually going to be using a lot of troops, so I'm just putting them on take charge and handling them one at a time. We got time to set up. You can see the cavalry is still quite a ways away. And when this is done, you will see what I mean in terms of bookending the artillery with infantry squares, so that the cavalry cannot charge the artillery, and it also provides the artillery with a wide field of fire. So this is the big brigade that you saw right there, and we're basically just going to move them by the objective and just not use them really. And we're going to just be using these two small infantry brigades that we have on either side of them. You can see we also possess La Hassant. We do have some troops out in the Orchid, which we will pull back into La Hassant as the cavalry comes closer. And La Hassant can pay decent dividends in this scenario, especially at the beginning when the French cavalry is trying to move up past it. The troops in there will be shooting them in their right flank. So it's good to have troops in there. I also have no problem double-quicking my troops in here in this scenario. There won't be any melees, obviously, because they will be in square the whole time. So fatigue is just nowhere near as important as I've sometimes made it out to be in other scenarios. But here it's really not an issue because our troops we're just trying to rush them into position, and they're going to sit there and square. So artillery is starting to open up. You can see the French cavalry approaching. And all I'm doing here is just kind of refining the position, making sure the squares are out far enough in front of the artillery that the cavalry cannot possibly choose the artillery as the target. They have to hit the infantry square, and of course cavalry cannot hit an infantry square. So that works out to our advantage. And as you can see, the French cavalry is moving ever closer, but not a lick of infantry in sight. And that was Ney's big mistake. Had he sent infantry forward with the cavalry, this would have been a whole different ball of wax, because we would not have been able to just form squares with impunity and let our artillery cut the French cavalry to pieces. And on this left battery here, I'm just going to move this the far left unit into the grove there, in the garden in front of La Hassant, because why not? Defensive terrain bonus? Sure, I'll take it. So we're going to pull these guys now back into La Hassant as the French cavalry is going to move up on it, and we will be able to shoot them kind of in their flank as they try to pass it. And everything over here, these guys to the right, these are not our troops. We're not in control of them. I don't give a damn what happens to them. I'm only interested in protecting my division and making sure we take as few casualties as possible. Nothing that happens to those troops on the right has anything to do with us whatsoever. They don't affect our score. They don't affect anything having to do with us. So all we're interested in here is protecting ourselves. All right, time to get this puppy going. You can see the French have now double-clicked. They are moving in. But what will happen is when their targets come into charge range, they'll be squares and not artillery. And it's an instant complete repulse. And they suffer massive casualties, because as they come closer, the artillery will switch to canister and start blowing them to tiny bits. So we've got 89 points so far. We're 5 minutes into the scenario, so basically 50 of those points are just from the objective. So yeah, the French cavalry is running down the right side of the Allied position here. They're going to capture all these guns, that is fine. We actually want them to think they have a chance here. You'll notice I have one square on my right flank actually behind the artillery, forming kind of a flank defense so that the French cavalry cannot get around my flank and try and take our position from the rear. So as you can see, the charge was just instantly stopped everywhere along the front by this formation that I've set up. All squares, artillery behind the squares with a wide field of fire, and there is just nothing the French cavalry can do against it. And this unit right here is protecting my flank because the French cavalry obviously ran through all these troops that we don't control because they don't have the slightest clue what they are doing like we do, and didn't set up a formation like this. So as you can see, I have infantry squares out in front, basically bookending all the guns, and the guns have a big field of fire. And you can see in the first minute of this, we've already scored 250 points, just blasting French cavalry to tiny bits. The real hard part here is within a few minutes, the French cavalry are going to realize that this is not working, and they're going to fall back. And the temptation, of course, is to pursue them so that you can keep extracting points from them. And you really don't want to do that. You want to let them pull back, you want to let them regroup, and you want to let them come at you again. You will have to move forward eventually, but right after the first wave here, that is not the time to do it. There's still a lot of French troops that are willing to come forward. Just give them a little bit of time to do it, and you'll get your points, because the further forward you move, the more your squares are going to take damage. There is quite a bit of French artillery back there, and even though our general artillery doesn't do a lot of damage in Scourge of War, against infantry squares, it can add up. So we want to try and maintain our distance and basically encourage the French to keep attacking by not overly pursuing them. Give them a chance to regroup, give them a chance to come at us again, and keep putting the wallop on them, basically. If you're over aggressive and you drive all the French cavalry off the field, you're not going to get any points from it, and you're going to bring yourself in range of the French artillery, and you're going to lose a lot of the points you worked so hard to acquire. So patience is a virtue in this scenario, as well as getting the right setup. You know, you don't want to swarm the French cavalry with just a shit ton of infantry squares and drive them off, because you're not going to get the points you need from them. You want them to think they have a shot, because you're not really heavily defending this position, but your placement of your troops and the formation you're using is really what makes this work. Not putting out a lot of troops all in square and just, basically stonewalling the French cavalry. We don't really want to do that, because then they'll know they don't have a chance. We want them to think they have a chance. We want them to think there's openings in our line, so that can happen right there. French canister just bombing away anybody that tries to move, in front of their field of fire. And they all have wide fields of fire here. You can see canister just blasting away here, and that's how we're getting our points. The infantry squares, yeah, they can rack up some points, but it's not going to be anything like what artillery canister fire can rack up. And like I said, there's a certain finesse to this. It's really a matter of patience and kind of knowing when the right moment is to start moving forward. You do have to move forward eventually, and the key is just to know when to do it. And largely that's a matter of when the French forces start pulling back en masse, and you notice they're not coming forward anymore. So we've got 500 points already, and we're only 10 minutes into the scenario. And that's kind of what you're looking to do. You want to get at least 500 points in the first 15 minutes of the scenario, because in the second half of the scenario, it's going to slow down. because now you're starting to start moving forward, and it reset up your lines, and all of that takes time. And while you're doing that, you're not shooting, so you're not getting points. So by like 16, 15 here, you want to be close to 700 points. By about halfway through the scenario, because it's going to slow down. In the last 15 minutes of the scenario, you'll probably only get, if you're lucky, maybe 300 points. So it can be tough to break 1,000 points. Now, I've played the scenario a bunch because I love forming square and shooting up cavalry. It's fun. I've done this a lot of times, and I've really finessed it and really worked out the best way to extract the most casualties. So I score something like 1,500 points here. That's not a lot for me. That's about average, but you will probably not get that amount of points on your first playthrough of this. I have a lot of practice at this. The first time you do it, if you're even able to break 1,000 points, I would be very impressed with that, because it's not easy to do. You really have to know what you're doing and have all your formations right and all your timing right to make that, point total. So we've got a whole bunch of squares. We got a square here with a whole bunch of French cavalry kind of right by them, and they're just shooting them to pieces. However, this square has also taken a lot of casualties because they're on top of the ridge, exposed, and the French artillery is actually doing quite a bit of damage to them. And you can see we're up to 800 points now. So, we're really, really doing good here. We're only 12 minutes into the scenario, and, we're past 75% of the way there. We're very, very close. And that's all due to having the right setup, not being overly aggressive, and just being, patient and letting the French hang themselves. Why I moved this leader, I have no idea. Probably meant to move something else. Ah, yes. I meant to move the square. So, at this point now, the French cavalry's attack has basically really slowed down here on the left, and we are going to have to start moving forward a little bit to try and keep a rate of fire up, basically. So we're going to start bringing the guns forward, and I think I'm going to move the left square there into La Hassant. Things are still pretty aggressive on the right here, but it too will start to slow down a little bit. And we're going to have to start chasing some of these guys off on the right here that are just sitting here. And I think I do take one unit from the reserve and bring them in to start pursuing some of these French cavalry units that are basically just sitting out there on the right. So at this point, I am starting to advance my units so that we can basically keep a steady rate of fire up on them. Because now the French cavalry have caught a beating, and they're much more timid in terms of trying to just come forward right into range of our squares and our guns. But we're doing good. We're at 860 points. But, at this point, we got to start moving forward to keep extracting points from them. But not so far forward that we really get near these guns. I've actually played the scenario where I've gotten, literally had my squares out here. And everything I earned was lost because these French guns just started pounding away on my squares. And, I started just losing points. And it took a lot of replays of the scenario when I, first started playing to actually figure out that, no, I don't want to pursue them that recklessly. I want to encourage them to basically stay in musket range, stay in artillery range as long as possible before I start the pursuit. Because the pursuit can only go so far. So we're going to bring these troops and kind of move them into La Hassant. because there's some cavalry out, French cavalry out here and here and here, and while we're in here, we're safe from them, but we can shoot at them too. So 880 points, and I'm always checking the point total here because I know we have to at least clear 1,000 points, and you know, I know we're not going to get a lot of it from the objective because it's only worth like 10 points a minute, which is just, you know, you should have not even bothered with an objective. Whoever wrote the scenario, it's worthless. But 10 points is 10 points, so you know, we'll take it. So again, I'm maneuvering the squares so that I can keep my artillery's field of fire open, and you know, I'm just doing a lot of misclicks here, trying to find a position my commander can move to. So we're gonna have to sidestep some of these squares a little bit and create some room for our artillery so that they can fire. So we got a bit of a second wave coming on here of the French cavalry, and again, they're going to be repulsed very easily. But you know, we don't want too much of this. You know, coming forward and running away. We're not getting a lot of points from that. You know, we just want them to kind of come in musket range and you know, and stay there. The more they run away, you know, the more we're going to have to pursue them. And we don't want to pursue them to such a degree that we move too far forward of our position. So that's where a lot of the finesse and a lot of the experience in playing the scenario comes in. And as you can see, this square here has actually taken a lot of casualties. They're at, you know, minus, because just it's all artillery. It's all French artillery that's been hitting them. So I keep moving them forward to try and get them off the ridge. And out of the French artillery's view, but you know, the French artillery just seems to have you know, an obsession with that particular unit, and you know, that's the one that takes the brunt of the damage in this scenario. And you know, the rest of my units, they don't really get hit that badly. It's just that one unit, and they just can't seem to get out of French artillery fire. So we're just slowly advancing, slowly keeping ourselves in musket range. We're going to go after some of these units on the right here that, you know, we're basically moving sideways as opposed to forward. So it's not really going to bring us in, you know, too much of an increased danger from the French artillery, but, you know, we can keep kind of extracting points. And that's basically what we're trying to do here, is just kind of pick apart the French cavalry and get as much as we can here, you know, before they just keep backing up and keep backing up. But we're doing good here. At this point, I think we're probably either very close to 1,000 points or over it. And we're 18 minutes into the scenario, and the scenario ends at 16:30. So again, just slowly moving my units up, slowly pushing the French cavalry, you know, not trying to push them back so much, just keep them in musket range, keep them in artillery range, and, you know, just keep kind of racking up the point. It's very tough to keep them in canister range. You're just trying to keep them in range where the artillery is actually effective against them. It's not necessarily going to be canister range because that's so short. It's only like 200 yards. They have to be really close. So we're at 970 points. We're only 30 points away from 1,000 points. You know, and you know, not only do I want to pass 1,000 points, I want to get decently past 1,000 points, because I know the further out I go here, the more casualties my squares are going to take from the French artillery. So I want to make sure I get a nice safety net of points under my belt, so that when that starts to happen, it's not going to dip us below 1,000 points. You know, because if you get 999 points, it's still just a victory, not a major victory. You have to actually cross 1,000 points. So again, I've now pushed the position forward and set up the same thing: squares, bookending artillery batteries. It's a little tighter of a formation now than I would like, and I'm going to actually see if I can move these squares kind of to the right, because there's a little space between the battery on the right, and see if I can open up some space for the battery on the left here. Just trying to keep the field of fire as open as possible, because the artillery is the damage dealers here. $1,014 points, so we now have enough for a major victory. But you know, if the French artillery starts really pounding on us, it can easily go south. So we want to still keep going, still keep getting more, still keep engaging the French cavalry and trying to shoot them up as much as possible, so we can get a nice buffer of points in case the French artillery start getting us. And you can see this unit here is actually very close. They've only got 3 points. They've taken more casualties than they've inflicted, and they just can't seem to get out of the way there of the French artillery. The French guns just keep targeting that one particular unit, and taking points from it. So we're down to 1 point now on that. So the way to combat that is to keep that unit engaged against the cavalry to kind of balance that out. Because the cavalry inflicts no casualties at all, because they can't do anything without being able to charge. So now we got 113 points over the amount we need for a major victory. That's a comfy buffer. Very unlikely they'll be able to extract 100 points even out of the unit they're hit. And we have 8 minutes left in the scenario, and at this point I will probably start to move the right side, these right squares, out more. There's a lot of cavalry out there we could be engaging that we're not. Sitting over there by Hougoumont, and those are just their free points. We got to go get those free points. So I'm going to start moving these guys forward. Although the cavalry just came in range of them, so they're engaged. So that's basically what we want. We want to keep as many of our squares engaged as possible, so that we can keep getting points. Just inching forward, keeping the artillery's field of fire open. Yeah, these guys are getting hit pretty hard. That French artillery is really doing a number on them. The only way to kind of keep it even is just to keep them engaged against the French cavalry, so that they can balance out the points they're losing from the French artillery by killing cavalry. And I'm just trying to shift them and see if I can find a spot where they're not getting so brutalized by the French artillery back there. It's annoying me that they're specifically targeting that unit over and over again with every gun they got, and just working on that one unit. So we're at 1,250 points now. We really have a nice buffer. There's no way we're losing the scenario. Some more cavalry coming into range. And see, by not really pushing forward quickly, we give them a chance to regroup, come back into range, and we can extract more points from them. The closer they get to this artillery, the more effective the artillery fire becomes. Even though it's not canister, when you get into, even short middle range, artillery can be really, really effective. So I'm going to bring another unit out and bring a square off on the right here, just because I see a lot of cavalry sitting there by Hougoumont doing nothing that we could be shooting at them and getting points from them. Little canister fire never hurts. and they turn tail and run very quickly. So we're still about even with this unit here. Gain a few points, lose a few points, gain a few points, lose a few points. I'm fine with that. You know, I just don't want him to start really taking a nosedive in points. You know, as long as they can keep themselves relatively even, you know, at least we're not, you know, we don't want to be, you know, bleeding points anywhere. You know, it's just not necessary to, you know, have your unit stand there and get pounded on and do nothing about it. You know, so because of the amount of points we actually need to get a major victory, and the fact that it's by no means easy to get that amount of points, you really want to pay attention to your casualties, and, you know, try not to get hit. Generally in this scenario, I found the French artillery will usually do this. It will pick one unit, usually the one it has best line of sight to, and just focus all its fire on that, to the exclusion of your artillery, the exclusion of the rest of your units. They're really mostly interested in finding one target they can hit, and they just keep repeatedly going for it. And as long as you can keep that unit engaged with the French cavalry, it should largely work out to be a wash, where you're not really getting points, but you're not really losing points either. And it can fluctuate up and down, but you just don't want to be bleeding off huge amounts of points, you know, that basically suck away from your point total. So we're doing good, though. We're at 1,360 points. That's a really nice buffer of points over the 1,000 points we need for a major victory. And we're going to see if we can get some more over here on the right, where we have a whole bunch of French cavalry that has pulled back, and we're going to see if we can shoot at them and get some more points here. They're not going to stand there for long. They've already been in combat. You know, as soon as we start shooting at them, they'll probably run off. But we'll get what we can from them. We got 250 points from this one battery. You know, like I said, the artillery is the real killer here. This one has been moving a lot, so it's only got 73 points. And 350 points on this battery. So these guys have done real work. You know, they're responsible for, you know, a third of our point total almost, just this one battery. So yeah, effectively bringing your artillery to bear in this scenario is absolutely paramount. It's part of the key of winning this whole scenario. And really what you're using your squares is just to protect them. To make sure that the cavalry can't charge them and capture them. Because, let me tell you, I think each gun is worth like 30 points. So if they run down on one of your batteries, you know, if you got a 6-gun battery, you know, that's 180 points if they capture that battery. It's like you cannot lose your guns. It's too many points. You know, so above all costs, you must protect your guns with the squares. So now we're engaging some of these cavalry units on the right here. Like I said, I brought one of my reserve units out and formed square on the right there. And we're just continuing to kind of let our artillery, pound away on what's out there. These guys have taken a bit of a hit now. They're down 6 points. But as soon as some cavalry starts moving forward, like they are right now, we might be able to get some of that back. So there they go. I told you they wouldn't stand there for long. So we're just going to have to kind of keep chasing them down and getting what points from them we can. You know, but notice I really haven't been overly aggressive in pushing forward. Yes, I have pushed forward, but only about as far as Lai Hassan. And I probably am not going to go any further. We have the amount of points we need. We're at 1,500 points. And I don't really want to bring my units much further into range of the French artillery back there. Because it's bad enough they're putting a wallop on one of my units. I don't want to give them any more targets. You know, and we only have 30 seconds left. There's no reason to try anything at this point. I'm sorry, 10 seconds. So, Yeah, that's pretty much it for the scenario. It's very easy to play, but it's harder to win because it's hard to get the point total you need um, to win. It's easy to it's a little too easy to just drive the French from the field and not be able to extract enough points from them. And the scenario time limit will run out, and you won't have enough points, and you'll be like, well, "What happened? I thought we were having fun." Yeah, you had a little too much fun, didn't you? You can't afford to go recklessly pursuing the French after the first or second wave. You got to give them time to regroup and come back at you so that you can keep extracting points from them over and over again. Because if you just, after the first or second wave, just start pursuing them, you're never going to give them a chance to reform and come at you again. You're just going to keep kind of driving them off and not being able to acquire enough points from them. Um, and a lot of the divisional scenarios that we have left, and there's only like three, I think, at this point, there's only like three scenarios left, are kind of silly in this way. Not in the same exact way as a scenario, but it's generally um, silly strategies you have to use, to win the scenarios. Like this, for instance, where it's like, I don't know what kind of realistic battle uh, you could do better in by not aggressively pursuing the enemy when they withdraw. But in this case, because of the fact that we need to acquire a certain amount of points, we can't afford to just drive them off right off the bat and run them off the field because we're not going to get the points we need. And points are kind of everything in the stock scenarios of this game. Um, Objectives, casualties, these things are more important than inflicting a crushing tactical defeat on the enemy. Yes, it's very easy if you want to in a scenario to just pursue the French cavalry after the first or second wave and just run them right off the field. And in a theoretical sense, that to me would be much more of a real victory than what we do here. Um, but the scenarios of this game kind of don't allow you the freedom to deviate from the prescribed goal of the scenario. You basically have to find a way to do what is expected of you, even if that means, pulling your reins in and not defeating the enemy to the degree that you would like to. Obviously, it would be much more fun to just run the entire French cavalry off the field and capture all their artillery and um, but it's not enough time in the scenario to actually do that and still acquire enough points to get a major victory. You have to take what's put in front of you, and what's put in front of you is French cavalry, and you have to extract enough points from them. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this scenario, guys. Like I said, don't freak out if you don't get this on the first try. It takes some finesse. I know I made it look easy, but I've played the scenario a dozen times. It's not like last time where it was a scenario that I just hadn't played in a while and didn't really remember it too well. I've played this one a bunch of times, so I've had a lot of time to really work on it and finesse the hell out of it in terms of developing the tactics and strategies that work best. And these are, you got a big head start if you do what I did in the scenario. Um, but some of the stuff like knowing when to pursue and when to advance your troops, that takes a little bit of experience and a little bit of practice. And it doesn't always come off to like this playthrough did. Like I've said before, one of the reasons I keep playing this game after years of playing it and having already beaten every scenario in the game many times, why do I keep coming back to it? Well, I keep coming back to it because every time I play it, any scenario, something different always happens. And that replayability kind of is what keeps me coming back. So yeah, I'm just kind of rambling at this point. I don't know why, but yeah, basically practice this: square artillery, square keep your artillery field of fire open and just don't be too recklessly aggressive, and you should be able to do it. So that's it for now, guys. See you next time.